Hi there, and welcome back to our Starsector pirate campaign. So in the last episode, we captured the colonies of Ankara, Yama, and Nachiketa on behalf of the pirate faction, which gave them a bit of a foothold here on the eastern end of the core worlds, and also put us within spitting distance of a technology cache with an alpha core that some gullible sod in a bar was kind enough to tell us about earlier. And since our recent exploits have given us a substantial reserve of supplies and fuel, I figure it's high time for us to go looking for some hull mods and weapons that will help us to round out the ship builds that are currently still lacking in our fleet. But before we set off, I took the special modification skill to round out the technology skill tree, and we also finally picked up a third officer who has been placed in the ARRGH until further notice. And in case you're curious, the Heron and Sunder are still drifting naked and ashamed at the back of the fleet. So without further ado, let's go locate that technology cache, and see if we can find a friend for our long-suffering beta AI core, who was recently reinstated as our resident disco ball, after finally wiping all remnants of that catgirl infestation from the ship systems. Alright, we have arrived at Delta Nu Azov, the system with the technology cache, which only has one jump point, and we already seem to know where the technology cache is, so no real decisions to be made here. As of version 0.95, I'm still not aware of any substantial consequences to either keeping or returning the Alpha AI core found in this technology cache. But considering the addition of so many new story quests in this update, I certainly think it would be prudent if something more substantial was added to this quest line. Meanwhile, we are facing a rather minor remnant AI presence as we rifle through the contents of this technology cache. While these certainly are a step above the derelict autonomous ships that we've faced in the past, the frigate and destroyer class vessels are nothing to write home about, so the 3 ships that we've deployed should be more than enough to handle this quite comfortably. I think one of the main weaknesses of these smaller redacted vessels is that they're actually quite slow compared to the human-crewed destroyers and frigates. For instance, the Hammerhead has trouble catching up to everything from Hounds to Tempests, and those smaller ships will be able to kite pretty much until their combat readiness runs out. But that simply isn't the case with the Glimmer and Lumen class Redacted. Even when using its teleport, the Lumen simply doesn't have the speed to get away from a Hammerhead, which makes them less troublesome to deal with than other ships of their size. At the time of recording, the developers of Starsector have just released a blog detailing some changes to player skills that should make it more viable to field swarms of smaller automated ships. But without an overall rebalance of redacted ships, I don't really foresee myself choosing that sort of fleet composition over having just a single Radiant with an Alpha core. But what about you guys? Have you found success with wolf packs of Lumens and Glimmers? Or do you feel as if I've underestimated their potential? What changes, if any, would you like to see to the automated ships in Starsector? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below. Also, and I wanted to put this out there for those of you who may feel a bit reluctant due to spoilers, feel free to discuss anything that may be new to this update, as I feel like we're far enough along in this campaign and have covered enough new material that anyone who didn't want to be spoiled would have gone seeking the refuge of other content by now. Okay, let's see what sorts of goodies this technology cache has in it. Oh, and it should go without saying that we're going to take that Alpha core. Okay, so we have a plasma dynamo, that's another one of the new colony items, and a few weapon and ship blueprints. So nothing that's going to be immediately useful to us. Alright, well that was a bit of a dud. I'm feeling like we could still do a little bit of exploration here. Let's see if there's any pulsar or black hole systems nearby and start heading in that direction. We do have a black hole to the northwest, and that seems to be the closest one, so let's head over there. Okay, we have arrived at the mute system, which seems oddly appropriate for a black hole. And it only has a single gas giant, so it shouldn't take long to figure out if there's something worthwhile here. Wow, there's a research station here. If I sound a little shocked, it's because I just checked the in-game date and realized that we've been going for more than a year now, and we're only just finding our first research station. And there are at least some hull mods here, the most useful probably being efficiency overhauls, which if we build into our atlas should help it to consume fewer resources as we're flying around. And we also seem to have caught the attention of a single Glimmer, who I suppose will now very bravely white knight for his orbital station after he caught us looking at his girl and stealing all of her goodies. And since we are still using a different ship for every engagement, I suppose the ARRGH will do in this case. If you remember all the way back to the beginning of this series, we had a Wayfarer that had hammer missiles mounted in its rear slots, and it basically had to turn all the way around to line up a shot with them. Well, the Cyclone Reaper torpedoes on this ARRGH are pretty similar, in that the AI is much better at firing from the off-center hardpoint than I am. And it probably doesn't help that I'm steering like a Grand Theft Auto character after about 5 drinks, or my mother-in-law while sober, which is embarrassing. Oh, and after his noble sacrifice, that Glimmer was nice enough to gift us with an ion pulsar, so that's nice. Now, let's see if our salvage crews did a good job. Nope, that's an Astro blueprint we almost left behind. So I guess we know who has latrine duty for the next week. Alright, well we're still pretty well stocked, and I'm not incredibly pleased with what we found so far. But there's most likely nothing left to see in this system, so maybe we'll just start heading back in the direction of the core worlds, and stop by anything that we happen to come across. Well, that certainly didn't take very long. As you can see on the minimap, we're still very close to that black hole system we just left, and there's a medium-level warning beacon here. Oh, and very conveniently, the nexus is pretty close to the jump point. I don't expect to find any hull mods here, but we might find some nice energy weapons to help round out some of our ship builds. So let's clear up some of these patrols before we take on the nexus. It seems this patrol has changed its mind about fighting us. Or perhaps not. Whoops, I've deployed the hammerhead without getting into it first, which just gives me the mental image of me confidently turning to my navigations officer and saying, "It's okay, step aside, I got this," and him turning back with a confused look saying, "But sir, you're still aboard the Odyssey," followed by me yelling at him for not saying something sooner. Poor guy, this is definitely not the last time this is gonna happen. Speaking of mistakes, I've been watching my wife play Super Mario Odyssey recently. She wasn't much of a gamer in the past, and it was only during lockdown last year that she picked up Animal Crossing New Horizons and really got invested in the game. Since then, she's been slowly working her way through our catalog of Nintendo Switch games, and it's been interesting watching her tackle a variety of problems that require a degree of video game logic. As someone who has considerably more exposure to video games than she does, it was completely logical, for example, that the correct way to dispatch of enemies that, in her words, looked like poop emojis, was to jump on top of them, whereas the same strategy would not work against the exotic houseplants. She's also a fairly nervous player in the sense that, when faced with a tense situation, she'll often look for the most direct route to getting out of the problem, rather than taking a moment to read the situation and look for patterns, with the result usually being her throwing the controllers onto the sofa and pouting at me until I do it for her. While growing up, all of my siblings were much younger than me, so I never really had an opportunity back then to lord my video game skills over anyone else. Experiencing it later in life, I can definitely see why kids might get a kick out of it. But what about you guys? Are you more the instructive type trying to do a little bit of helpful backseat gaming? Or do you like to show off? Or maybe you're the kind of person who likes to give a novice an unplugged controller and let them think they're doing a great job. Regardless, feel free to let me know your experiences down in the comments below. Alright, well now that patrol is taken care of, let's go deal with the Nexus. And we even found a new friend for our disco ball. I think he's been feeling a bit down lately, ever since we brought that Alpha Core on board. That thing's been really condescending for the past week, and I think we'll all be better off once it gets put to work driving tractors or digging rocks out of the ground or something. Anyway, we have a space station to deal with, and I specifically avoided using the Odyssey in the previous fight so that we could save it for this one. Even though this is the lower tier remnant space station, it still pays to be pretty careful, as all sides of the station have the potential to be pretty dangerous depending on the weapon loadout. At the moment, I can already see high-intensity lasers and Gauss cannons, so we'll definitely want to seek refuge if our hard flux starts getting too high. This isn't a weapon combination we'll be able to just tank for long periods of time. Thankfully, the lower tier station doesn't come with any shields, so as long as we're mindful about avoiding hull damage, we should be able to win by attrition. I'm just going to take a quick look at everything first before we commit to the attack. Okay, let's go for this spoke that's rotating towards us first. Alright, and this debris should be able to afford us a little bit of cover here. Let's vent before it gets blown to pieces. Okay, let's move on to the next spoke. These things have an outer protective layer, and then the inside actually has all of the weapon mounts. With the Conquest helping us out, we'll hopefully be able to take out both on this pass. Excellent. Now let's see if we can get someone to give us a little bit of cover. The Eagle has pretty low flux at the moment. Let's try ducking in behind him. Thank you, Eagle. Now kindly move. You're in my line of fire. I mean, I say that, but then I get right in front of the Conquest and expect him to be able to curve his cannon shells around me or something. Alright, calm down now, Conquest. When I said you only live once, I meant that as a warning, not as encouragement. Okay, almost done here. Let's circle around and finish off that last module. Excellent work. Now, unless I'm mistaken, these remnant stations are still pretty consistent about giving out alpha cores. So now we have 2 of them, and they can go argue about who's calculated the most digits of pi, or whatever it is they do. I don't really mind, as long as they don't try hacking into our backup of the Calicore archives. I mean, I have labeled that folder Cycle 197 tax returns, and I had been hoping that would suffice to discourage anyone from snooping in there. Meanwhile, we have another patrol that must have seen us blow up that space station but thought, nah, we can definitely still take these guys. Let's take the Doom out this time, and hopefully not eat too many harpoons. Let's have the Omen cover the Odyssey, and then the Apogee on the Astral. Unfortunately, we don't have any smaller ships beginning with the letter D, so I can't keep that alliteration going. Actually, I tell a lie. We do have a Dram. While this is going on, I did want to mention a video that I came across recently. It's by a guy named Josh Strife Hayes, and his channel normally covers MMORPGs. But in this video, he talks about the impact that nostalgia has on people's perceptions of newer games. I've added a link to Josh's video in the description, but if I may be so bold as to summarize, he basically argues that people's memories of a game are often affected by their overall quality of life at the time that they were playing that game. For me, that would definitely mean Guild Wars, which I picked up in college, a time when I had more friends and fewer responsibilities. I could stay up all night and not worry about having to make it to work or getting my son dressed and ready in the morning. I definitely think that Josh makes a strong argument, as almost all of my best stories about playing a video game are from a previous era of my life, when the conditions were more suitable to me being able to devote vast quantities of time learning the game, nurturing online friendships, and diving into the world and the lore. When I eventually quit Guild Wars, I migrated to a number of other MMOs with several of my guildmates. Games like Star Wars The Old Republic and Warhammer Online. But each time we moved, we left a few more people behind until we were scattered to the 4 winds, playing different games with different people. I think we had a hard time adjusting because these new games weren't immediately gratifying to the same level that Guild Wars had been. They didn't have the benefit of thousands of hours of in-game time, accumulating game knowledge and fond memories alike, in order to back them up. And we never gave any one of these newer offerings enough time in order to build up everything we had come to expect after being with Guild Wars for so long. To take Josh's point and bring it perhaps one insidious step further, I think that games you play for a really long time have a tendency to create a dependence. The longer you enjoy a game, the more closely you start to associate the feeling that you get from that particular game with your own mental conception of fun. I remember when Guild Wars 2 was announced, I was really hyped up for the type of experience I was hoping to get out of it. A rekindling of the original spark, as it were. So when it turned out to be quite different, I remember thinking that this just was not as fun. But that's because I had spent so long establishing the original as the very definition of fun in my mind, that it had become a foundational experience to me as a gamer. It's only in reflecting on my time with both games, now years later, that I can say that Guild Wars 2 really did do a lot of things better. So now whenever I play a new game, I try to be particularly vigilant about keeping nostalgia and force of habit in check, because I don't want to miss out on a great experience just because what's new doesn't quite fit into the mold that's been set by my prior experiences. And I think that's really helped me to get a lot more enjoyment out of games that my former self would never really have bothered with. Well, after finishing off that patrol, we've stumbled upon a ship graveyard around this old jump gate, and we are starting to get a bit full up in terms of fuel and cargo capacity here. So I think we'll wrap up this round of exploration once we've cleaned up the rest of these derelicts. And all of the new weapons that we've acquired has put me in a mood to potentially rebuild some of our less used ships. With any luck, I think we'll be able to put together a fleet that's fit to take on a star fortress, and we can finally bring those hegemony dogs in Chickamauga to heel. But win or lose, that's likely to be a long fight, so I think we'll cut this episode a bit short and get set up for taking on the capital of the hegemony in the next episode. So until then, thank you so much for watching, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you out there in the sector.